What's up, everyone? My name is James Lynch, and this is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, we're going to be talking about the Calvin Kattar, Josh Emmett main event, which takes place June 18th in Austin, Texas, as part of the UFC Fight Night card. It will be 5 rounds. But before I dig into this and give you my preview and my pick, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Those are 3 things that'll help me out big time. And also, I post content on here every single day. So if you hit that notification bell, you won't miss any of the updates on this channel. Why would you want to do that? Also, if you guys at the end want to let me know your pick and whether you agree or disagree with my assessment here today, would love to hear from you. Always like talking fights with you guys, so that would be awesome if you could do that at the end of this video. Okay, like I mentioned it there, UFC Austin, June 18th. 5-round main event. This is going to be taking place at the Moody Center in Austin, Texas. And we're going to start first with Calvin Kattar. 1/3 of the New England cartel. Really exciting fighter, really exciting matchup. I actually am excited to really break this one down here. So Calvin Kattar, he's got a 23-5 record. He's got 11 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 10 decision victories. He's currently the number 4 ranked featherweight in the division. Kattar is 34 years old. He's 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. So he's 4 years younger than Josh Emmett. He's going to have a 5-inch height and 2-inch reach advantage in this fight. Now, Kattar is also a BJJ blue belt. Exceptional boxing, no major credentials though there. And one of the interesting things I wanted to bring up in this interview is that Kattar actually trained with the Diaz brothers when he was 19 years old. If you go check out Josh Gross's interview with Kattar back in 2019 for The Athletic, he talks all about that and also mentioned how it's influenced his training and his style, training with the Diaz brothers. So that's kind of a cool tidbit that I'm not sure if everyone knows, but figured I'd add this in there. And another cool thing about Kattar is the fact that he's extremely durable. 28 career fights, never been knocked out. Now, he has been submitted. That was in his 4th pro fight. Believe it or not, Kattar actually fought in Elite XC. Remember that promotion, Kimbo Slice, the whole deal? That was in his 4th pro fight. He was submitted in that fight by a guy by the name of James Jones. We'll talk about Kattar's record in a second here, but yeah, really, really durable guy when it comes to his career. And of course, you remember that Max Holloway fight, which again, we'll talk about here shortly. He's got a chin of granite, so it's pretty amazing to see what he's been doing in his career. Okay, Kattar, like some fighters, did not have an amateur career. No amateur fights. He jumped right into MMA back in June of 2007, and I mentioned it there. The submission loss to James Jones. James Jones just 4 fights into his career, but then he went on a nice winning streak after that, and he didn't make his UFC debut until July of 2017. That was on the UFC 214 card between Daniel Cormier and John Jones, which is pretty crazy looking back how long ago that was. And I want to say he was an underdog in that fight, could be wrong, but that was a really good win. You had to fight Andre Fili in your debut. It's not an easy fight for anyone. So that's one of the more notable wins there for him, and we'll go through some of the other ones in a second here. But Kattar has a 7-3 UFC record. He's got 4 stoppage wins by knockout. I mentioned the wins there. Andre Fili, Shane Burgos. I believe he was actually the first fighter to finish Shane Burgos. Let me double check that. Pretty sure that's the case. By the way, nice photo here, Shane. Yeah, so I think Kattar was not only the first guy to hand him a loss, but it was also the first guy to finish him too. So that's a pretty notable thing. Also has a couple notable wins here over Ricardo Lamas, finished him in that fight. And who else did he defeat? Jeremy Stevens, Dan Ige, and then Chikaze in his last fight. That was a really impressive fight. Kattar definitely was the underdog in that fight. So for him to go out there and get it done after such a long layoff, very impressive win there. His losses, Renato Moicano. I'd love to see a rematch between the two someday. I know Moicano is at 155, but I think that fight could go a lot differently. He lost as a beat in a fight where I thought he did quite well in the 3rd round. He clearly lost the first 2. If it was a 5-round fight, who knows how that would have gone. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to get to see that rematch anytime soon, with Zabit appearing to be retiring and trying to train to be a doctor. And then the Max Holloway fight, which is about one of the most dominant decision losses you'll see. Kattar was not in this fight at all. Holloway completely lit him up. I think you could even argue that some coaches may have thrown in the towel. He was taking an absolute beating, and he ended up having a really long layoff prior to the Chikaze fight, and we'll talk about the layoffs in a second. But yeah, that was a fight where I think it showed that Kattar maybe not at that title level yet, just with how badly Holloway beat him. Like, it wasn't close at all. Like, it did go the distance, but there's no way I think you could give Calvin Kattar any of those rounds. I thought he was totally dominated, but saying that, extremely tough. I mean, Holloway was throwing everything he had at him, and he wasn't able to finish him. So I think that just shows the chin of Calvin Kattar in that fight. So I mentioned the layoff there. By the time he lost to Holloway and then fought Chikaze, he had a 364-day layoff, which is pretty big. But always want to err on the side of caution, not come back too soon. We've seen fighters do that. So credit to his team, Tyson Chartier and the rest of the guys over there at the New England Cartel. One of the interesting things here with Kattar is that he really hasn't had any major injuries throughout his career. In fact, he's been pretty active overall. If you look at it here, 2017, sort of mid-year, then fought 3 times in 2018, fought twice in 2019, fought twice in 2020, and then fought once last year. And then obviously he's already fought once this year. So this year he'll have 2 fights already. We already know that. One of the other things with Kattar, despite some of his fights going the distance, no controversies, right? I mean, they were clear either wins or losses for him. So yeah, Kattar hasn't been the victim yet of any bad judging decision or anything like that. So that's what you're getting with Calvin Kattar. Like I said, I think he'll end up being the betting favorite, and I'll sort of explain why at the end. But yeah, Calvin Kattar, really tough fight here against Josh Emmett. Okay, let's get to Mr. Emmett. Always exciting guy. So Josh Emmett is, as you can see there, 17-2 record. He's got 6 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 9 decisions. He's the number 7th ranked featherweight. He is 37 years old. He turned 37 already this year, so it's going to be 37 by the end of this year. 5'6" with a 70-inch reach. So I mentioned he's going to be a little bit smaller than Kattar in this fight, and he's obviously a little bit older as well. Also, by the way, I think I just screwed up my math there. It should be Kattar is actually 3 years younger than Josh Emmett, not 4. My math's not very good there. What are you going to do? Anyways, what else do we have? Okay, so yeah, let's get into Emmett's sort of credentials. He's a BJJ purple belt, and other than that, no major sort of accolades or anything like notable in terms of his career and as far as like titles or anything like that. Okay, so Josh Emmett made his amateur debut back in July of 2011. He made his MMA debut later that year in October of 2011, and he made his UFC debut in May of 2016, which was at lightweight. He fought John Tuck in that fight. Emmett is 8-2 in the octagon with 2 stoppage wins, which is interesting because he's got some pretty serious knockout power, but he's only got 2 wins by knockout. Sorry, 3 wins by knockout. My bad. I looked at it there. So he's knocked out Lamas, Michael Johnson, and Mirsad Bektic. So that's going to be 3 wins by KO or TKO. Some of the notable wins he's had in the division, and a couple common opponents here of Kattar. Ricardo Lamas, that was a really good win. Michael Johnson, he finished Johnson in that fight. That was super impressive. And then Mirsad Bektic, I'm throwing that on here as well because at the time Bektic was 13-1, so that was a really good win for him. A lot of people thought Bektic was going to be the future of the division. Josh Emmett halts that as well. Now, some of his notable, and then there's 2 other notable wins here as well. I don't want to glance over them. His last 2 fights, Shane Burgos, really good win there, and Dan Ige in his last fight too. So those are 2 solid wins in the division, both ranked opponents. So I thought that was very impressive. One other thing as well with Emmett, or some of his notable losses here, he lost a split decision to Desmond Green. To his credit, that was a fight that was in Green's hometown. I believe it was in Buffalo, New York in that one, but Green won. I went back and actually looked at the decision on MMA decisions. The media members, the majority of them scored them for Des Green. And then he lost to Jeremy Stephens in a fight where some people feel like it was a bit controversial. There were some shots to the back of the head there. He did end up getting finished in that one, but it was a bit of a weird situation there with him losing to Stephens. I've always wanted to see that rematch. Unfortunately, we won't get to see it with Stephens being in PFL now, but yeah, that was kind of a weird fight there. So really, he's only got 1 loss, and if you forget about the Stephens fight, which, a little bit of controversy there, he's only really had 1 loss, and that was to Des Green at lightweight, right? He's a featherweight, which is interesting. And I went back and also looked at Emmett has bounced around between weight classes in his career. He's fought 10 times at featherweight, 7 times at lightweight, and he's had 2 catchweight fights. So one was actually earlier in his career at 168, and then he had another catchweight fight, which was at the Ricardo Lamas fight. Actually, was he missed weight for that one? He came in at 148.5 in that fight. He hasn't missed weight since, but still, that would be considered a catchweight because he didn't make the 145-pound limit. Now, one thing that we do have to point out here is that Emmett has had some layoffs here. So if you look at the fights from Jeremy Stephens to Michael Johnson, where again he got pretty injured in that Stephens fight, there was a layoff of 399 days in that fight, 400 days basically, since between those 2 fights. Then going from Bektic to Shane Burgos, there was a 343-day layoff. Going from Burgos to Ige, there was a 539 day layoff in that one. Again, injuries and a few other things. And then by the time he fights Calvin Kattar, it'll be 189 days since his last fight. So a lot of layoffs for Emmett. And we'll explain why sort of in a second here, is that he's had a bunch of injuries. So if you remember, I don't know if people remember, he was actually supposed to fight Jeremy Kennedy in Kennedy's UFC debut back on UFC on Fox 21. That was back in 2016. Undisclosed injury, not sure what happened there. And then I think people also forget he was supposed to fight Arnold Allen back in 2020, Emmett getting injured in that one. He's had some knee injuries. He's had a variety of injuries throughout his career, but it looks like now he seems to be pretty healthy. So yeah, few injuries, few layoffs. I didn't put down the Stevens injury here, but I believe it was his orbital bone that was broken in that fight. So yeah, he's had some long layoffs here, a lot. So that's one thing to consider when you're looking at the activity level of Josh Emmett. Now, Emmett's had a couple close fights in his career. He had, like I mentioned there, he does have 9 wins by decision. One of the fights that I went back and looked at was the Shane Burgos fight. I was actually surprised that 2 media members scored the fight for Burgos, 2 scored it a draw, and then 16 scored it for Emmett. So majority felt like Emmett won, but I did find it interesting that some people did score the fight for Shane Burgos. And then his fight with Dan Ige in his last fight, also surprised by this, how close it was. 7 media members scoring the fight for Emmett, 6 scoring it for Ige. So pretty close there. Could have gone the other way. But again, that's life. You know, you're going to have some fights that are close and some that aren't. So there we go. Like I mentioned, we do not have odds available for this fight right now, so it's kind of tough to gauge. If I had to guess, I'd say Kattar might be anywhere from a 2-1 favorite to like a slight favorite, maybe like -150 around there. It's tough, right? Because Emmett's got some serious power, and age-wise, there's not too much of a gap there. And I'd say that Emmett is definitely one of the hardest punchers that Kattar's fought. I would argue that Emmett has more power than Max Holloway, but that's just my thoughts on the fight. So, who am I going to be picking in this fight between Kattar and Josh Emmett? I give a slight lean to Calvin Kattar, and a couple reasons why. I mentioned the height and reach advantage. I mentioned the fact that he's extremely tough to put away. Like, if Emmett can't knock him out, can Kattar go a full 5 rounds with Emmett? I think he can. You know, we saw him take a serious beating there from Max Holloway and was still able to go the full 5 rounds. So Emmett's got to, I think, look at the strategy a little bit. Also, as we've seen, Emmett, does have good wrestling, but Kattar was able to sort of do that in his last fight against Chikaze in that fight. So, Kattar's very well versed. I'd say when it comes to the stand-up, I'd say Calvin's probably a bit more technical. Emmett has the edge in power. Ground game wise, they both seem to be pretty good there. I mean, I don't know if anyone has a particular edge there. And, both guys are, pretty big in terms of the weight class, like Emmett being, I'd say really strong for the weight class. That's, I think translates to his power. And Kattar, I know as well, is a pretty big featherweight. I mean, he's 5'11", right? So that's a pretty big stature for the weight class as well. So I'm going to go with Calvin Kattar in this fight. What it comes down to for me is that I think he's going to land the more technical shots. This kind of reminds me a bit of, and we're going to see that fight coming up here soon, between Ioane and Jacek and Weili Zhang, with Emmett sort of being like Zhang, where, there's more power there, but Kattar being a bit more technical, kind of like Ioane and Jacek in a way. But I think Kattar's speed will be a little bit too much for Emmett. And add in the fact that Emmett's he's taken so much damage. He's had a lot of injuries. Like I mentioned, he's had a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of reasons like Kattar in terms of his activity. Outside of the Holloway fight, he's been pretty active almost every year and hasn't really had a ton of injuries throughout his career as well. So what I see happening is, Kattar stuffing those takedowns. Should Emmett want to wrestle here, I see him keeping it upright. And I think Emmett will land some good shots. I could see him stealing a few rounds here. But I think overall, Kattar's speed and his technical boxing is going to be too much for Emmett. And I think Kattar's actually going to win a decision here. So like I said, if the odds have Kattar is like 2-1, -150, I mean, obviously if it's -150, you'd maybe bet Kattar there. But I think we could potentially see this fight going the distance as well. So I'll be looking for that fight goes the distance prop, because again, while Emmett does hit like a truck, I think Kattar's shown that he's got a chin on him, kind of like his teammate Rob Font. Those guys both can take a punch for sure. So I'd be looking at that. I'd also be looking at Calvin Kattar by decision. And yeah, those are some things I would kind of keep an eye on from a betting perspective in this fight. But the pick's going to be Calvin Kattar. And just to summarize again, like I said, I think the level of opposition, you look at who he's fought. I mean, Kattar's fought guys like Zabit, and he's fought, Max Holloway. These are guys that I think are a lot better than any of the guys that Emmett's fought. He's also finished Shane Burgos, whereas Emmett went the distance with him. By the way, I did interview Emmett before this, so make sure you check that out on my UFC interviews playlist. He actually brought in Shane Burgos for this camp, and of course, he fought Burgos, and Burgos fought Kattar. So maybe we'll see if that makes a difference in the fight as well. And I will not be getting an interview with Calvin Kattar. As far as I know, he's only doing UFC mandated media, but I'll be keeping tabs on Instagram and seeing what he's been up to as far as his training. But yeah, I mentioned it there. Like I said, better level of opposition. Kattar's going to be a little bit bigger. He's tough to finish. And like I said, the activity level and the lack of injuries. I know, again, that Holloway fight was a pretty bad beating. So, as far as durability goes, I think both guys are kind of similar that way, but I just think Emmett's had so many more injuries and he's older. That just does not translate very well for a lot of fighters. So the pick's going to be Calvin Kattar by decision to get it done. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you agree or disagree with some of the points I made? Curious to hear your pick for this one. How do you think this one's ends? Again, more than happy to discuss the fights with you guys as long as you guys are being respectful. That's kind of the main thing here. We just want to have a nice discussion about this fight. But like I said, 5-round main event, UFC Austin, June 18th. It's going to be an amazing fight. I'll remind you one more time, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. I am posting content on here every single day, so you don't want to miss any of the content that I'm posting on here. And I do this show pretty much every week. So if there's a fight you guys want me to preview that's coming up, it could be any fight. It doesn't have to be a main event. If there's a fight you're really interested in, let me know. I'll break it down from a stats perspective and give you my pick and preview. So my name's James Lynch. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you next time.